eighth discovery or thesis statement from this case study is that dissociative age regression occurs when neural wiring affiliated with parent-child bonding from the perspective of the child becomes independently activated. So basically, adverse childhood experiences or traumatic stress during early life disrupt attachment development, provoking divergent neurodevelopment with unique order of the neurobiological social engagement system. The social engagement role affiliated with parent-child bonding from the perspective of the child does not achieve neural connectivity with other social engagement roles. And so the neural wiring from those experiences during early childhood continue existing and operating independently of more recent neural data. The neural wiring involves implicit memories, so various sensations and action patterns, and it involves distinct styles of brain-body engagement. When this region of neural wiring is activated, then the social engagement role independently creates unique experiences of consciousness, and they may involve having a sense of self that feels like life did as a child, because the sense of self comes from projections from neural wiring as consciousness experiences the brain-body system. And so the sense of self then unconsciously feels like the sense of self from an early stage of neurodevelopment. And in addition, the way that the brain and the body are naturally regulating and operating mimic that of an early stage of neurodevelopment. And this might involve increased activity in the right brain hemisphere and decreased activity in the left brain hemisphere. It might involve chronic disengagement of the prefrontal cortex. It might involve dysfunction of cranial nerves or reduced vestibular and proprioceptive abilities. It might involve all these different unique styles of neurobiological activity as the social engagement role of the child in that parent-child bonding from the perspective of the child. That social engagement role is activated, engaging distinct regions of neural wiring, projecting interpretations of self and reality, and how that is engaging various styles of brain-body activity and manners of regulation. Because the neuroscience of dissociative age regression is a very misunderstood topic around the world, I'd like to explore this just a little bit more in depth. So two things happen when dissociative age regression activates. The role within the neurobiological social engagement system of parent-child bonding from the perspective of the child activates as vibrational signals are processed through this complex neural wiring. That role activates. The first thing that happens is neural wiring from a stage of early childhood engages, affecting navigation within the unconscious body-mind. The second thing that happens is brain-body activity shifts its style of operation to an early stage of neurodevelopment, adjusting regulation within the unconscious body-mind, so navigation, regulation. So I want to look at these things in particular and how this neurobiological activity impacts personal experience. Understanding this opens so many doors for healing. It's important that we understand what's actually happening in these structures so that people who are experiencing these miraculously unique occurrences can have compassionate understanding for what they're going through. And so healing practitioners can have deeper insight into the science of what their clients are experiencing so they know how to be there for them more effectively. We really can't provide healing empowerment of any kind, whether it's compassionate validation or potential hope for improving any associated health challenges. We can't embrace those potentialities until we understand the neuroscientific causalities behind these unique experiences. So let's explore this. Navigation within the unconscious body-mind affects identity and personal experience. So the first element of this is how the self relates with the self. Okay, so there's a few different elements of identity. It's how the self relates with the self, how the self relates with other people, how the self relates with elements of life experience. There's a lot of different components to this aspect of personal identity, and it all comes from how neural wiring is engaging. Okay, so the first thing is how the self relates with the self, and this includes internal conceptualizations like your skill sets, for example. An adult might have complete confidence in their skills and abilities. But when you're a child, those skill sets haven't developed yet. And so your confidence in your own abilities is much less than it would be when you're an adult. This is one of infinite examples. So personal confidence is affected during age regression. How the self relates with the internal conceptualizations with the self is impacted during dissociative age regression. The second thing is how the self relates with the physical self. Okay, if the conceptualizations of the self are coming from neural networks developed during early childhood, then how the self is innately understanding the body is going to be different. And there may be challenges with that. Because if the neural networks are attempting to navigate the body of a 5-year-old, but the body is actually 25 years old, then there's going to be all kinds of misfires within the neural activity that impacts experiences of consciousness. So when we move through life and we're trying to have compassion for these unique experiences, we need to look at where our experience is coming from. Like when we're moving through life, everything's so automatic that we dismiss the miracles that are occurring. But the fact that we can navigate our sense of identity and our physical body and our conceptualization about who we are at all is a miracle. And so in these dissociative age regressive experiences, how the self is navigating the self is dependent on neural activity stemming from stages of early childhood, because attachment development was disrupted and these regions of neural data didn't continue expanding with all this other new updated information. So there's parent-child bonding from the perspective of the child within the neurobiological social engagement system, and these regions of neural wiring are existing, operating, continuing to expand independently of other regions. And this is where the sense of self is coming from. So how the self relates with the internal conceptualizations of the self, how the self relates with the external conceptualization of the physical body is going to be different and unique during these dissociative age regressive experiences. Okay, the next part about this is how the self relates with the outer world, including other people. So when you move through life, if you're a grown adult and you're at a grocery store, let's say, for example, and you're walking past other people, how do you understand who you are in relation to them? Okay, think about that for a minute. When you're walking through the grocery store, how do you understand who you are in relation to other people? Okay? Really pause and think about that for a moment, because this isn't something that we naturally tend to explore. When you're walking through the store, your unconscious body mind is doing a million things to let you know who you are in relation to each person. And if that stuff is disrupted, then you might find yourself at the grocery store going up to every person like, "Hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever." To every stranger. If your neural networks are providing disrupted navigation where every human being looks familiar to you, then you might walk up to every stranger in a grocery store and greet them like they're your best friend. And they're going to look at you like you're nuts because they've never met you before. Just as one example of how neural networks impact personal experience. Okay, so when you're moving through the grocery store, you understand these are strangers, but they're safe to be around. I've never seen them before, but they mean me no harm. And when you're a grown adult, you're walking through a store and you see a child, you understand that you're an adult and that's a child. All of that information is being unconsciously provided by neural networks operating in the unconscious body mind. During an age-regressive experience of consciousness, you might be at the grocery store and adults seem very domineering, very superior. You might feel very small in relation to the people that are around you because the unconscious body-mind is not providing navigation that explains that you are equal to these people. You're an adult just like these other adults. And so adults might have this sense of, they might seem a little bit more intimidating, just as one of many examples. And then the other little part about this is if you're in an age regressive experience of consciousness and your neural networks are providing information that say, hey, you're 5 years old, then when you see a child who's 5 years old, you're going to look at them and think that they are a peer. There won't be an instinctive ability to feel like a peer to adults, even though the body is an adult. Instead, you'll look at children and feel like those are your peers, due to how neural networks are navigating a sense of identity unconsciously. So how the self relates with the outer world and who feels like a peer is one example. Whether children or adults feel like they are your equal, those types of details are going to be impacted during dissociative age regressive experiences of consciousness due to how neural networks are unconsciously navigating a sense of identity. Dissociative age regression will also affect how the self relates with other elements of personal experience, such as responsibilities. An adult has a lot more responsibilities than a child does, and the ability to connect with that and show up for that and know how to move through that stems from neural wiring. So when that neural wiring is not accessible, then it may feel very overwhelming or daunting to attempt to move through adulthood activities because the neural data that provides those abilities, that knowledge, that insight, those instinctive understandings allowing for navigation through those experiences is not accessible. While an adult might move through and be able to, pay the bills or go get the oil changed in the car, just kind of basic adulthood activities, during an age regressive experience of consciousness, those types of tasks are going to feel very overwhelming or daunting or impossible or anxiety provoking because neural networks providing that information unconsciously are not accessible. It has to do with brain-body activity, 1000%. It has to do with how these miraculous neural structures are contributing to automated styles of personal experience from behind the scenes. And this is so important to understand. We have to look at the neuroscience of it. We are at a point where mental health care has the opportunity to evolve and understand the neuroscience of every type of unique experience, including trauma-related age regression or dissociative age regression or chronic age regression, and understand the underlying causalities contributing to these unique experiences so we can provide effective validation and healing empowerment. Looking at what's happening on the outside isn't going to provide either of those. We have to look at what the brain and the body are up to unconsciously so we can address these unique experiences effectively because they are miraculous. Age regression is a profound miracle, and the more we can understand it, the more we can uplift dissociative age regressive experiences into healing empowerment in any and all types of ways. So the first thing that happens with dissociative age regression is it affects the unconscious navigation provided within the unconscious body-mind. This affects how the self relates with the inner self and the outer self, how the self relates with other people and other elements of personal experience. And the third thing that this navigation affects are interactions with experience. This is basically how identity, or the self relating with the self and other people in the world, impacts unfolding moments. How a 5-year-old engages with a moment of opportunity is going to be very different from how a 25-year-old engages with a moment of opportunity. How a 10-year-old engages in a brand new moment is going to be different than how a 40-year-old engages in a moment. And it has to do with the way neural wiring is contributing to personal experiences of consciousness. So how identity engages with personal life due to how the self relates with the inner and outer self, how the self relates with other people in the world, and how that information is unconsciously contributing to how the self is interacting with unique moments of personal experience. All of that is going to stem from neural wiring developed during early childhood, regardless of how old the body is. The body could be 70 years old, and during a dissociative age regressive experience, moments of unfolding reality will stem from stages of early childhood. It doesn't matter how old the body is. It doesn't matter how old the self appears to be. It has to do with the unique styles of neural activity. So if you're age regressing to 5 years old, then no matter how old the body is, the styles of personal experience are going to stem from neural wiring developed around age 5. Along with affecting navigation, age regression affects regulation. To understand this, we can actually look at the pyramid of learning and see how young stages of early neurodevelopment impact different styles of brain-body activity. So in the pyramid of learning, we've got the central nervous system at the baseline, and then it moves up and explores sensory systems, olfactory, visual, auditory, gustatory, tactile, vestibular, and proprioception. Then it moves up to sensory motor development and explores body scheme, reflex maturity, ability to screen input, postural security, awareness of two sides of the body, and motor planning. And then it moves up and explores perceptual motor development and talks about auditory language skills, visual spatial perception, attention center functions, hand-eye coordination, ocular motor control, and postular adjustment, and then moves up and explores cognitive intellect, daily living activities, behavior, and academic learning. During experiences of dissociative age regression, all of these elements are neurobiologically impacted. During experiences of dissociative age regression, 100% of these details in the pyramid of learning are neurobiologically impacted and unconsciously affected. So the ability to be aware of both sides of the body at the same time is impacted due to how the brain and body are unconsciously engaging and contributing to automated styles of personal experience. Depending on how young a state of consciousness is age regressing to, the effects of this might be a little more intense and severe. If you're age regressing to 2 years old, there's going to be much more of an effect on these elements of neurobiological activity than if you're age regressing to 15 years old. Ranges along a spectrum, but these elements within the pyramid of learning are all neurobiologically impacted during experiences of dissociative age regression. It's extraordinarily paramount that we look at the neuroscience of these experiences to understand what's actually happening to create them and how we can use this information to more effectively navigate loving empowerment for these unique and miraculous experiences. The most fascinating aspect about this is how the physical body might understand itself from the perspective of a child. So for example, as an adult who's like about 5'6", I understand my self-orientation from the eye level of someone who's 5'6". But a child relates with the world from the height of their body. And so a child might understand the world from a 3-foot tall perspective. When this unique neural wiring engages, it's interpreting reality. And oftentimes it might interpret reality from the memories of being physically small. And so as the eyes acquire abstract information translated into personal experience and provide a visual sensation for the mind or the self to observe, the surrounding reality might be from the perspective of being 3 feet tall instead of 5'6". Even though it's all happening in the same grown adult body, it has to do with the way neural activity is translating sensations of self in relation to reality. For example, when you go to reach a doorknob, it's somewhat below you, right? Like you're tall, you're up here, your eyes are up here, you kind of have to look down. And there's this relationship between your sense of self through visual eyesight and the external reality where you're reaching for a doorknob. And you understand that it's a couple feet below you and it's maybe near your waist while your eyes are up here. In an experience of dissociative age regression, the doorknob might feel like it's at eye level rather than waist level. So it's very, very miraculous and fascinating how the interpretations of reality completely come from the activity of neural data unconsciously. And when neural wiring from an early stage of neurodevelopment is independently operating, it can project interpretations of self and reality through that specific perspective of implicit data. During my case study work, I identified 3 specific types of age regression. Cognitive age regression affects the conscious mind, where there's perceptions and thoughts and feelings. Subsational age regression affects the unconscious mind, where there's more subtle backdrop sensations or emotions or implicit memory activations or activation of attachment well-being. Physical age regression affects the way the brain and the body are engaging. And so if there's difficulties walking or speaking, for example, that may be a sign of physical age regression. And then with these 3 types of age regression, there may be partial age regression, where 1 or 2 of these are being activated. You might feel age regression inside the unconscious and conscious mind, but the body is still able to be like, I'm an adult. Or the body might be experiencing difficulties reading or walking, but the inner reality of the conscious and unconscious minds is able to access more recent neural wiring and data from adulthood. Or there could be complete age regression, where all 3 of these types of age regression are simultaneously occurring. And then all the activity, conscious and unconscious, body and mind, are experiencing life through an age regressive state. Each of these types of age regression ranges along a spectrum from newborn and infancy to stages of early adulthood. You can find out more about these concepts in my book, Liberated Consciousness.